So we have some injury updates before tomorrow's game against the Chicago Bears. Also, Monty Rice has been elevated off the practice squad for this upcoming game. So let's get right into it. So today's video is being brought to you by MyBookie. Use code DOSE when signing up with MyBookie. It's a great time to get in on the action. Today, we have a few things to discuss, and I want to start with the injuries first for the Lions side. Then we'll go to the Bears. I really want to dig into the Bears injury updates and then also talk a little Monty Rice, make himself felt, and potentially stick with the Lions as we go forward, even if that's on the practice squad, just going forward to be elevated, maybe just for a special teams type of role. First off, Trevor Nowatzki is out for this game, second straight week, just some depth at that backer position. Now, Monty Rice can add some of that back. I think there is some flexibility there, though I think he's more of a true off-ball linebacker, so it still stinks not to have Trevor Nowatzki after this past season, but it seemed like he was trending the right direction. He's just out this week. Sione Vaki is also doubtful for this game. Stinks because I don't think we're going to get his impact then on kickoff return, but Jacob Sailors is on the 53-man roster right now, so they didn't actually have to elevate him for him to be available. We'll see if he's active or not, but I would assume that he is, and he's probably going to be back there. They could always go back to Craig Reynolds as well back there, and of course Grant Stewart, but all of the special teams value that he can add, plus some offensive value. Kerby Joseph popped up on Friday, so we didn't actually get to hear Dan Campbell speak on this. He had limited participation on Friday, dealing with a knee injury. It's never great when a guy pops up on the last day, and now he's listed as questionable, so we'll keep our eyes on that. The positive is that Daniel Thomas is going to be set to be available in this game. Of course, we have Rocky Sin. We also have Avonte Maddox. Thomas Harper is going to be available, so the Lions should have bodies if they need that. Run support has been fantastic. He's had so much flexibility in man coverage for us defensively as well, where he can step down, deal with tight ends. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of that against Chicago. Plenty of two tight ends looks with Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland. They may even mix some three tight ends in the game, so that would be a very unfortunate loss. And then Taylor Decker, who didn't practice all week, but the way that Dan Campbell spoke on it, John Morton told us earlier in the week that he expected him to play, as he kind of made it sound, we're going to string this out. We had an extra day, as he was talking on Friday. He doesn't really need to practice being a veteran. So I'm still pretty optimistic that Taylor Decker may be able to give it a go, but if he can't go, of course, they're going to go Giovanni Manu, and he sounds really fired up for that opportunity if that is the case. But that sounds like where they're going to go if he's not available. But right now, it sounds kind of optimistic. Also got an update on Mekhi Wingo, and I'm not sure that Mekhi Wingo is actually going to be active this week. But again, the way that Dan Campbell spoke about it, he talked about his flexibility, the fact that he did get reps this week. He likes where he's at. I think having Mekhi Wingo would be very valuable, specifically, I think, third downs. I think the Lions could absolutely interchange him for a guy like DJ Reader. We understand that the Lions' goal up front is to contain the pocket. I think Reader does add some of that value, as well as Tyleek as well. But just for a little bit more juice, specifically rotationally, I think that's where Mekhi Wingo could come into play extremely well. As Dan said, we can play him at nose, we can play him as a 3, we can play him as a big D end, as we did a little bit last year. So he seemingly is viewing it more of an interior piece. And right now, I love where the Lions are at on the interior, and they could always rotate him in as kind of a backup 3 tech for them, beyond a guy like Roy Lopez, who I thought did some good things last week, because again, they could just use a little more juice in the inside. They'd still have Chris Smith that they could go to in that mix. So I'm fine with where the depth is at. It's really just for some juice as a pass rush piece that I think that he would add value. Of course, he gives you some big D end depth, so where you're a little bit thinner in terms of proven pieces there beyond Al-Quadin Muhammad, who is going to get some looks this week, it does give you an option. So I would like to see Mekhi Wingo give it a go. I mean, this is a player that we weren't sure how much time he's going to miss. It seems like he's on a really positive track to get going pretty darn soon here for the Lions. And this would be a great week, I think, for that to be the case against an interior offensive line that had some struggles last week. I think Joe Thuney had some losses to speed and quickness. If there's one thing that Mekhi Wingo can bring, it's juice upfield. He can get on an edge. I think that he can get into the chest of Thuney and maybe flash some success there. That's the one guy that stands out to me that you could have settle in there, especially on like a second down and long, and still be able to give you pass rush presence. Jonah struggled a little bit last week. Dalman was a little bit hit and miss, but to me, it's that opportunity to maybe get something on Joe Thuney on that left side of the O-line. And I think Mekhi Wingo could have the best bet to do that. Right now, we're probably going to get crafty up front, especially if he's not available. But it's just what comes to mind there. So that's the Lions updates. As we go through some of these injury updates and roster moves and the impact that it could have on game day tomorrow, it just means it's the perfect time for you to get in on the action using code DOSE with MyBookie. So right now, I currently have put together a 4-leg multi-parlay for the Lions Bears. And these are just the player props that I think are really interesting. These are very adjustable over here on MyBookie. I know you can also build out some of your own individual player props as well. So currently right now I have Khalif Raymond under 11.5 receiving yards. I think Tesla is going to be a bigger part of the game. He's not actually a player that you can bet on, I believe, outside of touchdowns. So I think it's a great opportunity to potentially rock the under there. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs over 28.5 receiving yards. He had 31 last week on the lowest average of all time on 10 receptions. I think he's going to be plenty involved in the pass game, a few checkdowns. I really think it only takes one play all the time. That's typically my reason for explanation there. But also, if they play some heavy zone in the back end or even man, the best matchup a lot of times might be just get Gibbs the ball and try to make one guy miss, and you got an opportunity in some of those single high looks. It's also having over 68.5 rushing yards for Jahmyr Gibbs. Just think that after seeing week 1 and see how much they utilized him, I love Monty, and I thought Monty looked really good, but I think there's a clear love for Jahmyr Gibbs that John Morton and this coaching staff has. And as much as Ben Johnson is going to be about probably slowing him down, there's just not much you can do with a guy that's that explosive, and he's due to pop one. I know it's only been a week, but he's due to just take one. Last week was so weird to watch. He's due to take one home. And I'm going to wrap it with Brian Branch having at least 7 tackles. I think there's going to be plenty of outside rushing, so I would look for a DN. They have Hutchinson at 3. The problem I have with Hutch is the fact that I think they're going to run away from him. So always look for Brian Branch in the run game, run support. Element to this could be Kerby Joseph. If he's not out there, how does that change Brian Branch's role? Do they use him as more of a single high safety? Do they keep him a little bit more deep? I would say that I think they're going to come after teams. They're going to let that run game presence be felt by Brian Branch. So I'm going to give him 7 and say that he just makes plays all over the place. And if you put that together and you were to bet $10, your return could be $130. New to my bookie, use our code, and any bet you choose up to $500 is fully covered. Make your play, and if it doesn't hit, you get it right back when you opt in using your bet back bonus token. So get in on the action. Biggest 2, Jaylon Johnson and TJ Edwards, are both set to make their 2025 debut for the Bears. They missed both those players, including Kyler Gordon, but Kyler Gordon is also set to be out once again this week, which to me is a massive loss. It's one of the best slot corners in football, and I think we see that every time we play him. The dude is fantastic. So not having him does open up some opportunities for the Lions. One, I immediately think 11 personnel, getting a guy like Nick McCloud on the field, who, again, I'm a fan of Nick McCloud, but on paper, you get him on the field knowing that they have Jaylon Johnson back. I think it opens up the field a little bit more to have 2 options that you can feel good about, going at Tyreek, going at Nick McCloud a little bit more consistently, and then maybe staying a little bit away from Jaylon Johnson, because that's typically how it works out, because how they play in cover 3, how lengthy he is, how much ground he really covers, the consistency in terms of his play. This now gives you another option where the Lions could work 12 personnel. They go St. Brown wide with JMO. Obviously, then they're going to get one of those 2 matchups, but they could absolutely lean into some 3 receiver sets, potentially more, to just put more of those DBs on the field. 4 receiver sets, get another DB on the field, force them to play that game, open up opportunities for Tesla. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of movement this week, and I'm curious to see if Chicago follows anybody. I doubt that they do based on how they play stylistically. Jaylon Johnson will probably just plant down at left cornerback, so you may work the opposite side a little bit more often. You can go to some of those 11 personnel looks because they don't have Kyler Gordon, right? I think it just loosens it up a little bit there in the back end. And then, of course, TJ Edwards, who to me is a very good coverage linebacker, very consistent as a run defender. Specifically, that's what always stands out for me, is he's consistently usually where he's supposed to be. He's good on some misdirection plays, counters. He feels very consistent in that sense. He'd be replacing Noah Sewell this week, who I thought played really well. I think Sewell adds a different dimension. I think he plays a lot faster from what we saw, at least that first game. Plays really fast. He has that ability to be a little bit of a disruptor, a little bit of a TFL guy. I think Edwards has that too, but I feel like he plays a little bit more of a patient brand of football. But where he stands out is coverage, especially zone coverage. There's flexibility. They put him on the ball. He steps in passing lanes. He's got a really good awareness to his game. A lot of smoothness when he's working in zone coverage specifically, but overall, he can be a little bit overly patient. I think you can connect with him at the second level. You can get him on some misdirections if he's a little bit overly patient. He does play fast when he reads through it, but I think there's real opportunity to connect with him at the next level in the run game. So I think the opportunity still stands for sure to run the ball, and it honestly could be a slight benefit running the football versus a guy like Noah Sewell to just get that going in general. Obviously, coverage, he's going to be a very impact piece there. So just emphasizes even more, hey, have success on first and second. If it's 3rd and 4+, it's not great, especially with all the different coverages they're going to run, the way that Edwards fits into that. And, of course, Jaylon Johnson as well, with his length, his size, some of the burst that he has. It's, to me, just consistency. He's very consistent what it feels like at the top of the route. Either one, you have to be ready to play through physicality, which a guy like Isaac Tesla could fit into. There's length to his game. But then there's also the element you also may, on the flip side, have to have a little bit of finesse to your game. From what's expected, catch him off guard a little bit at the top of the route, because he's very consistent. So you have to get him in some unique situations where you catch him off guard a touch. Maybe you can get his footwork a little bit thrown off. I don't think he's the most dynamic in terms of recovery ability as a corner, so I think that opportunity will present itself. I anticipate the Lions will be looking the opposite way a lot in this game. for Tyreek, trying to attack his eyes. They did it last time we played Chicago at home, and also going at, of course, a guy like Nick McLeod as well in the slot. The last point that I want to make is Monty Rice. Give him some attention because, we'll see how this goes. But Monty Rice, a former third-round draft pick out of Georgia. I was a fan of Monty Rice when he came out. Maybe got overdrafted a bit. The fact that he's now with us. He was just with New England this past year at 6 foot 230, only 26 years old. But he played well over 100 snaps in this year's preseason. Haven't really seen him a ton in the regular season. The biggest thing that was let down to me is haven't really seen him blitz much. And I just feel like his skill set maybe could offer some of that. He's not the loosest athlete, so maybe not. But ultimately, I thought maybe he'd have the skill set to have some there. He's got a little bit of slither to his game. He's got enough burst. I just wonder if the Lions could dial some of that up if they put him out there on defense just to add a change of pace to that defense in the meantime. But ultimately, what you do like is there is some easy acceleration. There is some downhill burst. You can get him to work in some of the flats, work some underneath routes, close ground pretty quickly, sideline to sideline. There's some juice there when he gets going. And typically his eyes are in a pretty good spot. Typically he responds pretty well to the flow of the ball. He gets in a good spot pacing-wise. He attacks angles in the run game, kind of beats linemen to their spot. Fast he plays from that sense, attacking gaps, becomes a little bit of a thumper downhill, scrape over gaps after working into his position very quickly. He plays with that kind of urgency that I think you like as a run defending linebacker specifically. And at the catch point, he's got plenty of explosiveness in coverage. In zone, he's got some pop to him. He's got some nastiness to work him as a rat backer. He's got the explosiveness to be dynamic and just kind of be an athlete over the middle of the field. If a quarterback took off, you could find some success there. Though I don't think he's always an elite tackler because his body control feels a little messy. He feels a little bit tight. This also shows up in pure man coverage. He doesn't feel overly fast. And also he just doesn't, to me, feel like he has the best agility, working through traffic, sticking through routes. Even in space as a tackler, it feels like there's missed tackles because his body control and entry was just messy, and it leads to some inconsistency there. The pop that he plays with in his game and his pads, he can lack some stoutness, but I think when you think about special teams value, you don't worry about that as much. You're not worried about old linemen connecting him at the second level. You're more so worried about maybe kickoff return, right? Or in kickoff situations, you're more so worried about that. So it's a completely different game, different dynamic. I assume that's where he's going to get the most of his looks this week. And as the Lions said, and Dan Campbell said after this last week, special teams, there was only a few players that really stood out to him on special teams. So my guess is that's where he's going to get a majority of his looks this week. But hey, if it goes well, right, because it's clear the Lions bringing up Pittman off the practice squad for week one meant that they wanted him for that role, and that's what he's been for us. To me, it leads to an opportunity to stick around. He's just going to have to show off some of that fieriness, and it may translate pretty well for him in this one. The first time we played Jaylon Johnson, he allowed 2 receptions for 10 yards. And the second time we played him, he allowed 1 reception for 4 yards. Just that's kind of just brings it and drives it all home. So with that, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Shout out to my bookie for sponsoring today's video. Use code DOSE, and I'm out.